Part 3. Getting ready. When I decided to walk the path, the kit I had available was a little sparse and I was more than a little out of shape. I wouldn't call myself a glutton, but I'm certainly a fan of good food and I still drink more than I should, a bit more often than I should. Combine that with a lockdown lifestyle spent working at a computer, only sporadic periods of exercise, and the fact that I was fast approaching 40, well, you can probably guess that my physique was hardly that of an endurance athlete. I knew some work had to be done, but figuring out how to get at least partially in shape during lockdown was a little bit of a challenge. With all the gyms closed and access to the outdoors severely limited, I turned to YouTube again and started following the free workout videos posted by Joe Wicks and Team Body Project. You can picture an 80s style workout montage complete with power ballads and neon sweatbands if you'd like, but really it was more me piddling about in front of the telly trying not to pull something. Nevertheless, a few weeks of that combined with an aerobic step and some cheap vinyl dumbbells shaved off enough pounds to make a difference. Then, once the lockdown was eased, I was able to get outside and walk around the neighbourhood on a regular basis. Unlike a lot of neighbourhoods in Abu Dhabi, Reem Island was actually quite pedestrian friendly. Plus, there were a number of walkways along the canals that were being built across the island. Although you could cross most of Reem in an hour or two, there were enough of these walkways to make a 5 or 6 mile walk possible. Plus, there were enough staircases around to make the otherwise flat terrain a reasonable proving ground for the exceptionally hilly terrain I was training for. It wasn't perfect, but then training programs rarely are, and it increased my level of general fitness enough to make the first few weeks on the path a bit less painful than they otherwise might have been. Kit was another question altogether. At this point, my hiking kit consisted of a horrible pair of cheap, ill-fitting boots, a Peter Storm waterproof jacket that was at least 15 years old, and a Euro hike day pack that I'd had for just as long. When I'd gotten a chance to do a little bit of hiking back in the UK, I'd generally gotten by with my gym gear and a hoodie for when it got chilly, so clearly I needed to do some shopping. Of course, I did have some idea of the type of stuff I'd need given my familiarity with the West Country and its weather. For those that don't already know, British weather is extremely changeable, and British coastal weather doubly so. British coastal weather during spring and autumn, on the other hand, has the meteorological equivalent of multiple personality disorder. So, you pretty much need to pack for every type of weather short of tornadoes and blizzards, while still keeping your base weight reasonable. As those who hike in the UK know, this is a hell of a juggling act, and one you can't really achieve without knowing what sort of kit is available to you. As I hadn't done any serious kit shopping in years, I knew I'd need some help, and of course I ended up finding it in the same place I'd found my training videos, on YouTube. You probably surmised by now that I'm a bit of a fan of YouTube. The platform certainly has its issues, but generally I'm a big fan of anything that makes information accessible, especially information that helps empower people to try new things and share their experiences with the world. Personally, I really enjoy the fact that I can click onto the site and learn about a massively diverse range of activities and experiences from people who are clearly very passionate about them. Of course, it would be nice if the conspiracy theorists, anti-vaxxers and QAnobbers would sod off and go somewhere else, but you can't have everything. Thankfully, the hiking and outdoor channels on YouTube are generally apolitical and therefore refreshingly free of the utter lunacy common to some other contributors. However, the vast majority of blogs, reviews and recommended kit lists I came across were intended for Americans preparing to hike one of their Triple Crown trails, the PCT, the AT or the CDT, and a great many advocated the ultra-light approach. Now, I can absolutely see the value in cutting down pack weight where possible, but I've honestly never felt that weight is the only determiner of performance. Besides, I couldn't see myself cold soaking couscous or cutting the hilt belt off my backpack to save grams. No offence to the ultralight community, but I need a little bit more comfort in my life. Mostly because I've recently entered that wonderful stage of life where you find you can actually throw your back out by yawning too hard. So, I ended up going up for a pack setup that was a little bit more directed to camp comfort, but I still managed to keep my base weight around 11 kilos, which isn't too bad. I will have to admit to a few false starts and a couple of bad choices. For example, at 2.8 kilos, the Van Gogh Hevelin is not a backpacking tent, and regular size sleeping pads are only good for size 0 short asses. But eventually I ended up with everything I needed. Mind you, sourcing it proved to be a little trickier than expected. While camping is incredibly popular in the UAE, it's usually based around car camping and done in a desert environment. Consequently, a lot of the kit that's available in the local camping and outdoor shops isn't really suitable for backpacking in a temperate and very changeable climate. So, even though I think Jeff Bezos should be given a paper cut on his tongue for every dollar he's ever refused to pay in taxes or contribute towards a living wage for his employees, Amazon was the only reliable source for most of the kit I needed. I did consider the idea of buying all my kit in the UK just before setting off, but given that I knew I'd only have a couple of weeks before heading out, this would have given me very little time to source and then properly test the gear I'd be using on trail. If you're interested in the specific gear that I use, there's a link to my SWCP lighter pack page underneath, but I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail about it here. The other big issue I knew I'd have to contend with was navigation. I wouldn't say that I could get lost inside a paper bag, but I'd certainly have to take my time reading the exit instructions. Even on a path as well marked as the SWCP, I knew I'd need a solid navigation system, so I supplemented Paddy Dillon's guidebook from Cicero on my Kindle to save weight, with the Hiker app for my phone and a set of A to Z adventure maps that covered the route. I'd not had much experience navigating with old school paper maps, but I figured with the guidebook and the Hiker app alongside I'd probably find my way. As it happened, I got quite good at using the maps during the hike, but the Hiker app became my go-to navigational tool and I can't recommend it highly enough. As for my daily itinerary, I figured that I'd just follow the recommended 52-day itinerary on the SWCP Association website. I'm sure I could have personalised it a little bit more, but years of working in education have immunised me against wasting time reinventing the wheel. Besides, the SWCPA itinerary was perfectly good. My only criticism is that it seems to rate sections as easy, moderate or challenging based only on elevation gain rather than terrain and mileage. As a result, I found myself cursing at the sky while walking a number of sections marked easy that were anything but. Anyway, once my kit was gathered, the school year had ended and I tied up all the loose ends of life in Abu Dhabi, it was time to get over to the UK, which again turned out to be a little bit more complicated than expected.